But I think if you look at it as like a team effort, I think if you measure the team success, I always like to think of it as like how much effort do we want to put as a team to kind of fix this problem. So you'd imagine.
We are kind of live now. This is what I always wanted to say. We are live.
And we're officially live.
We are officially live, exactly. I mean, this is just an experiment.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Nick.
Welcome to the Design Table Podcast.
We're talking about design, ROI, return on investment in particular. I mean, that's what it's kind of a hot topic at the moment.
It is.
Lots of discussion.
It is.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been actually obsessed with for the last month or so. Both talking like individually, just like reflecting, and also I'd started a new company and talking with my manager. So I got some good insight there. So it's been top of mind for the last month or so.
I mean, that's interesting. I would love to hear more from that perspective. But then you're saying in-house, you have a manager with a perspective, with a clear opinion about
Yes,
ROI.
of course.
And me, I'm more on an agency / freelancing side. I mean, there's probably a different view on ROI, I imagine.
Yeah. I'm curious how you approach like that subject. Like, I'm assuming there's like you have some existing clients, but when you're kind of kicking things off with a brand new client, and they're approaching you or you're approaching them, like, I'm curious what their expectations are or what expectations you set to make sure that you're giving your number A, solving their problems, and then making it clear that you're giving value.
I think it's you have the literal return on investment. I put in X amount of dollars and I get Y amount of dollars out of it. But I think the biggest one is more like a perceived return on investment. When let's say a startup founder or someone with a SaaS business, software as a service, they usually start very small and they do everything on their own. They purchase, for example, a UI kit, some sort of framework or a boilerplate. At some point it takes off. They have some recurring revenue or a few sales, and then they're like, okay, now I have people to keep on board. Now I don't want churn. I need to take this whole thing a lot more serious, and then they're like, well, maybe I need a salesperson, marketing person, maybe I need a designer. So they have some uncertainty with them. Like, is this good enough? Is this professional enough? And then when you work with them or start working with them, taking away the uncertainty, for example, by doing a review, then you can point out like, this thing is great, that area can be a little bit better. That already makes it feel like it's worth their time and their investment, because they feel peace of mind, and they can also see the before and after. Currently it looks like this, very much UI kit like, and now it looks, let's say, more custom, more attuned to a target audience, more like what the founder has in mind, something they couldn't get out of their head visually. So it feels for them that they're much happier. So that's the perceived value. And then on the ROI, literally, I'm a bit more pessimistic, to be honest. If you look at an hourly rate of any freelancer, the ROI would take quite a while, I think. If someone's working with you for, let's say, $4,000 or $5,000 a month, like, it's not going to be an MRR, like monthly recurring revenue increase of $5,000 per month each month, so there's a huge delay in ROI. Like, once the designer goes away and then you wait a few months or even a few years, then maybe at that point you make it back to money, if you ever make back to money. So maybe the ROI is more about limiting the negative. I don't want to make it too negative, but a good ROI means getting closer to that break-even point, I think.
Okay. And like, when you're like approaching, like, what portions of like the SaaS do you kind of tackle? Do you tackle like the website, like optimizing like the lead conversion, or are you as well tackling like the actual application itself?
I try to be as all round as I can be. Usually that's let's say it's a customer journey from, hey, I have this problem. Oh, I found this website. Maybe they're interesting for me, signing up trial version, hopefully converting into a subscription, like that customer journey. It starts on the website and then it ends up, in one or two main user flows within the application. And then there's everything in between. Sometimes it's branding also, just how you're viewed by the outside world. So mostly it's that first entry point into the application.
Okay. Yeah, I think from my perspective, I'm always like, I came from an e-commerce background. So everything is like conversion, tracking everything. It's been like ingrained to me. It's like the life of like selling, physical or like digital products online. It's all about like, okay, we're optimizing the landing page. How, like, if we're putting more spin on the ads, now it's worth it because we have that conversion rate that we kind of tweaked. So like from my perspective, I've been working in-house, for the longest time. And then, well, more specifically in like B2B SaaS. So I've always found it a bit difficult to understand like your value that you would put forward, seeing that like oftentimes the structure is you have, you're a bit disconnected from the sales process. So you're speaking to users, optimizing, the application. And then it's up to the sales team and the customer success to either upsell or find new customers. So it's like finding a way to understand like your impact, because it's a bit disjointed sometimes.
So is there some sort of delay, perhaps? Like you have a design suggestion, has to be built, has to be shown into an ad, put on a website, and then maybe a few weeks later, you can see your addition to the return on investment, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And often it's like, I feel it has to be often very collaborative because you're working with like the sales team. So you're understanding, okay, if I sit in like as a fly in the wall into one of their sales demos, it's like, where are the objections? And then how can I, as a designer, work on a feature to kind of alleviate that blocker in that process. So as you work on it and then measuring that, it's not direct. So it's not like, putting up an ad, I can see the conversion rate live. It's like more slow and more, I feel it takes more time to get, the perceived ROI in the end.
I think I get that. And maybe because I imagine you mentioned different roles. I mean, you're working in a larger company, I think, many different people, different roles.
Yeah. I mean, a decent size, it's a startup, so it's around like 60 or so people. So it's,
60. Okay.
yeah. So I guess depends what you describe as like a small or large.
That's large, I think. Yeah.
I've been at startups where it's been like the first 20 people in and then scaled up to 150. That's like the max I've been in terms of like headcount. But I know there's companies like thousands of employees, so I've never hit that mark.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the reason I'm asking is mostly because when multiple people work on, let's say, increasing the conversion, like you said in the beginning, and then the conversion goes up a few percent, then it's hard to, quote unquote, claim your part of it, because it's a joint effort. It's you, maybe a visual designer, programmer, salespeople, marketing people, like they all work together to get that 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but are you like 0.2, or without you, would it have been impossible? Or are you maybe only a very small part? Like it's hard to put it into words, like how much of that team effort was yours or the designer.
Yeah, I think it's hard, because it's true. It is like a collective effort. So it's like working closely with the PMs, defining like the scope of the product, doing some discovery, and then doing that client work until you have a final solution, and then handing it over to like, the brilliant minds of the engineering team to kind of push it live, and then like understanding, well, what piece of the pie did I contribute to? But I think if you look at it as like a team effort, I think if you measure the team success, so I always like to think of it as like how much effort do we want to put as a team to kind of fix this problem? So you'd imagine like all our salaries kind of collectively put together to solve like an 8-week problem, and then to measure the ROI from there. So we want to spend these 8 weeks to fix this problem, and I want to make sure that we're limiting the scope so that the business knows, okay, we spent X dollars, and now we're going to try to put in place some mechanisms so we can track how well we did. So we can see as a group, what's the ROI as a group versus as the individual.
Mm. Would you call that what a lot of people call data-driven design? Like, is that a big part of what you're doing?
I do a bit of mix of both. So like a bit of like validation. Yeah, I do. I think you should do it all around. Like I like analytics just when you're pushing things live. There's benefits to like unmoderated and moderated. So like incorporating users into your kind of process, validating your ideas, and then once you have like your production ready, to circling back with them and then showing them what you've kind of built, see if you kind of hit or miss the mark. In addition to kind of taking a look at your analytics and your metrics to make sure that there's always a difference between what people say they want and what they actually want. So,
Oh yeah, of course.
so it's about like tracking and seeing if they're actually engaged in the feature or the product that you've just launched.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of the ROI. Like the ROI is very, you put in X, you get out Y, and then where's this break-even point? And so if you're just designing something, to make it pretty and just based on opinions, like the founder says it's nice, but the marketing guy says, well, let's make the button green. Like, that's very hard to then turn into ROI. But if you have, conversion rate and time on page and a few quotes from user research where they really say like, hey, this is so much better, like that really helps determining the ROI, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're doing like the triangulation approach, just like getting information from all angles, it helps build the story.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you have any situations, or well, no, let's go back one step. I'm very curious about that manager. You started in the beginning of this recording. You mentioned a discussion with your manager. Like, is he a designer or like or is he literally your manager? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, she's a design manager, so she's like a similar background to mine. But she's in that kind of leadership role, so it's like more of that like business front, understanding the business, and then mixture of like the day-to-day kind of managing the team, and understanding like design fundamentals. So it's a good person to kind of just because I've followed the IC track most of my career, and it's good to get some mentorship from people kind of out who have a different perspective on things.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So having a manager with a design background, that's a good position to be in. She probably understands more of your struggles and what the designer finds important, how designers think and operate. So
Yeah, I think so. I think I've had a mixed gamut. So I've had like managers that have been kind of marketing with marketing experience, others who are project managers, or direct to CEO, depending on the size of the company. So it's always, I think, refreshing to get someone who views things through a similar lens.
yeah, I think so. So what's her view on ROI? Like, any cool new insights from your discussions with her?
It's interesting to kind of think of like if you're a leader and kind of your perspective is to help facilitate like the team. So like how can you be like when you're a manager, you're not like people aren't working for you, you're working for them. So it's like how best can I alleviate some of the pain points they're feeling? So how can I empower my team to do their best work? Because I've had that perspective as a designer. I know what gets in your way. So how can I kind of remove those roadblockers, so that you can do your best work and faster? So you're not twiddling your thumbs kind of hitting the roadblocks where you're trying to get things approved, or you're not clear on something, or you need certain software, or you need some insights. Like, they've been there before, they know what you need, and they're giving you the tools to get over those humps.
Right. And do you, you're talking about roadblocks that are really, that really makes me think about all the roadblocks designers face. Any ROI specific roadblocks you can think of?
Sometimes, well, not in my current, sometimes when you're in a company and it's like, depending on like the design culture within the company itself, there's sometimes like understanding the value of design and like where we come and where our input is most valuable. So sometimes some companies you're not allowed to speak to users directly, which is a wild concept to me. So it's people being the gatekeepers behind the users, because they don't want, they feel like they don't want, they're protecting their clients because there's a specific way that they need to be handled versus, I think everyone within a company is an extension of the customer success team. We're all kind of, at the end of the day, we're like, a business is run by solving other people's problems, and we're all doing our little category of the business kind of contributes to that.
Makes me think of freelancing project I did, I think now 3 years ago. They also were very protective of their users. So you had like the business, and business employees were account managers for clients. So we had like the middle person. And like my manager and stakeholders, they were very much like, no, don't bother them. They're all busy. They don't want to talk to you. So it wasn't really forbidden per se, like by company rules or anything. But they were very adamant, like, don't bother them. They're busy. They're doing important work. But I was very lucky to know a former neighbor, like from years ago. I knew he was a account manager for that same business. And this was a nationwide business. They had hundreds of account managers in different locations and offices around the whole country. I'm from the Netherlands, so it's not really a big place. I can just drive over there if I wanted to. So I reached out to him, even though like my stakeholders were like, don't do it. But I felt like, having a personal connection with that person, old neighbors, old friends, really helped. Because I was like, well, I mean, he can say no to me in a friendly way, just like, because he knows me. But he was very happy to connect me to even more account managers. And fun thing here is that even though the stakeholders were like, no, don't talk to them, each account manager was very happy that someone from HQ, like the main building, took an interest in them, in their work, and were looking for ways to improve their work, through design, like the daily annoyances. How can we solve them? The whole thing. And each and every one of them were very happy to mention more account managers they knew from different locations, and it spread very quickly to me spending an entire month going by car from office to office through the whole country. So a very long answer, but what I'm trying to say is, sometimes stakeholders are like, don't do it. They don't want to talk to you. And then there's a bit of distance between them and the actual user. And then it can turn out that the user is actually very happy to be involved in the process. So I wouldn't let that kind of comments bring you down as a designer. Sometimes it's good to be a little bit of a rebel. Otherwise, nothing gets done, especially in large corporations. That's what I'm thinking.
I think often it's about like this asking for forgiveness and just kind of getting it over with. I think maybe you can dig more deeper. Like, so has there ever been a situation where you kind of alluded to it, where you're kind of gone in a conversation and they're not kind of used to kind of giving that feedback, and then you found that I found like generally when I'm doing some research or talking to users, it's either I'm sending out a survey or I'm looking at NPS scores. And I'm generally looking to speak to the people who are quite upset with the companies.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm curious if you have any experience talking to the users or clients who are not super happy with the service, and how might you have kind of facilitated those kind of conversations?
It's one of the things I had in mind. So I'm glad you're bringing this up because the other thing that happened to me was like the account manager. I always asked them like, can you connect me with some of your clients? And they were always very sure to connect me with happy clients. And then you have
Mm.
this user interview where like, tell me about your experience with, X company. And then they're like, yeah, I'm very happy, dot, dot, dot. And then the conversation, it's basically finished. Like, and
Right.
then you ask like, but are there any annoyances? Tell me more about your, something that went wrong last week. Is there anything? And then they're like, no, 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 I'm happy. That's not useful at all. Um, but the opposite in what you're asking, the angry, let's call it the angry or unhappy user.
Right.
Um, they, in my experience, they feel like the person coming to them to their door and or in a Zoom meeting or whatever. Um, they are not angry at me per se. They are angry in my presence, but angry at the bigger company. So they're the client, and I'm an employee there or a freelancer. And I'm like, this is not going to hurt your relationship with your company. We're not going to hold this against you. Please feel free to let me know anything you want to let me know, because it will be helpful. Um, and in most cases, it puts them at ease, and then they feel comfortable enough to really be honest with me. And for me, especially if I'm allowed to record such a moment, that's a real eye opener, especially for stubborn stakeholders. And when they're like, no, 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 design subjective, it's pretty, I don't like it, blah, blah, that kind of, we don't need design. UX is pixel pushing, that kind of stakeholder. And then if you show them an angry customer about to unsubscribe from the service, that's a real eye opener. That's really helpful. So I'm just motivating them to be as angry and as honest as can be, because that's very helpful if they are.
Well, they're the ones, I feel like they're the ones that give the most honest feedback. So,
Yeah,
and it also depends on what time of day. Like maybe people are in bad moods. They're just upset, and they're not upset at the software. They're just like something's happened during the day that affected their mood, and their patience level is relatively low.
that's true. Yeah, one of the angry people I can recall is one of the clients is a large bank over here. Like we have 3 or 4 large banks. So one of the main ones, and one person has been a customer for the same bank for like 40 years, 40 plus years. And then they needed some sort of loan to help with renovation or whatever. And that person felt very much like he was being micromanaged. Like, tell me all the details, tell me this, tell me that before we can even consider giving you a loan. And he was very angry. Like, I've been on time with my payments for 40 years. You've made a lot of money over me with interest and that kind of stuff. Why do I still have to enter all these things? Don't you know me? Don't you trust me? And he was very emotional about it. And he felt like he deserved better. Um, and that's a tough thing to change as a designer. If you talk about the return on investment, because it turned out that that's just Dutch law, and that you have to ask certain things. So when people ask for money, you have to ask some things in return. Then there you are as a designer, with your whole talk of being, user first and user friendly. But the only thing you can do in that situation is, improve the experience for such a user by better explaining why we're asking this thing again. While you might be inclined to try and not ask the thing, user doesn't like this question. Well, let's get rid of the question. But that's not always possible. So that's why that's the challenge, I think. Also with angry customers, you can't always help them.
Yeah. And sometimes like even just speaking to them, like sometimes we're in a world where we're just interacting with the software, but if we get a chance to speak to someone who's part of the business, just getting that explanation might just alleviate like the frustration.
Yes. Yeah. Feeling heard. That might be is that how you say it? I think that's the important one as well. Like there's someone
Yeah.
listening to me.
And I think what I like to do, is depending what softwares you have access to, I like tracking, like whether it's NPS scores or surveys, you get to track someone's kind of, rating of your service or software over time. So it's always fun to see like, I remember at an old company, we used to do NPS scores, but use emojis as like a ranking system. So it was fun to kind of see like their initial ranking was like a sad or an angry face, and then watch the progression over the year. It's like, okay, they're active in giving their input, and like we're jumping on sessions, and we're seeing that whether we fix something or they're feeling heard, to watch their rating go from like a negative to a plus. So it's like it's negative today, but it doesn't have to stay that way. And that circles back to like ROI. So if you're tracking it, you can kind of see your impact there.
Yeah. And starting with a sad or an angry emoji, it actually is a good thing, because that's a relatively easy way for you to prove your ROI, because there's a lot of room for improvement still.
Exactly. So if you put in your deck, I feel like emojis is a nice way to put it. Just like if you're doing your presentation of like what we've done over the last quarter or half a year, and you go, here are our scores, and we've had a lot of, it translates directly. You have a lot of sad or angry customers, and now they're happy, versus we had a lot of fives, and now we're at a two. I think it translates a bit better.
Yeah, that's true. The before and after visual in the slide deck is always very strong. Maybe it's interesting to, this is a first episode. We don't really know about the audience we have or hope to have yet. But do you think it's worth it to quickly explain what the NPS scoring, like how that works? Like maybe a entry-level designer listening to this can take something from this.
Yeah, I mean it's relatively straightforward. It's just an additional metric that you can use to gauge like the satisfactory level of your customers. So depends on the cadence, but you can generally send one out like every quarter or every couple of weeks, as either an email or as an in-app pop-up. Just having them rate their experience from like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, whatever it is. And then you can collect that data and kind of get a pulse on your users, like or dislike of your software. And I always like to incorporate like a little text field, like add your personal comments here, so you can get into like the granular level of like why people are happy or dissatisfied with your service.
Yeah. It made me also think about something I did earlier with for a customer, which was the SUS score or SUS test. I think the system usability scale.
Okay.
And that's also a standardized method of testing where you have users complete a certain scenario. Something like imagine you're a user. Please sign up and complete 3 steps of the onboarding and create your first, whatever. Like that's a scenario. You have users complete that scenario if they can, because not being able to do it is also a valid result. And then they get a fixed number of questions. I don't know if it's 8 or 10 or whatever. And then it's all multiple choice, and depending on what they choose, they get a score. You do this for, let's say 5 or 8 users, then you get your average, and then it's out of 100, you have a score. And then you go to work, maybe do user testing, prototyping, the whole design ritual we have, and then you test again. And then you can really see, and then ask the same questions, and then you can see if it went up. And I think they say 68 out of 100. That's considered the line, like everything over 68 is you've passed the test. Everything below 68 is it's not enough. If I remember correctly, it's been over a year since I did this for this company. Because you need a lot of users, and you need all you need quite a big company to be able to facilitate such a testing metric.
Yeah.
But it's very useful. You can really track the before and afters, and you can really see like, hey, this change we're pushing, is it an improvement? Yes or no? Like if the number goes up, it's an improvement. So that made me think of when you mentioned like the NPS scoring, and I think both of them are very useful for ROI. You can really say like, we've put in X amount of time, and look at this. The smiley faces are actually smiling, and the sus score is going up. So yeah, ROI is there.
Yeah. I think it's all great. I think, I know you've been like me, been in the design industry for a little while. So like, I think you remember in like, I think 2010 when, in the startup world, it was just about, we know what's best for our users and let's build it and then hope they like it.
Yep.
Which, it was an interesting concept at the time. I think it was like a time where everyone's kind of quite selfish or bold, or just like, we know what, like we've been doing tech or design for a while. These are like the standards versus I think now, I think we're getting more tactical on
Yeah.
how we approach.
Yeah. No, it's still there. I think it's a risk for anyone. It's not just we as designers, from our high places looking down at people, and we're not like, hey, don't make this mistake. But I think we can all be too biased in no, I know who the user is, I know what they want, so I don't need to do these steps. I think it's good for all of us to approach something like a complete beginner.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's also like a microcosm of if you've ever been in like the agency world, there's a lot of disconnect between like the projects you deliver and like it's really like you're starting off a project, you're building a website or an application, and it's you're just handing it over to the client, hoping that it works. But often, like you're on to your next project, right?
That's the thing. Also with agencies, you have I think that the challenge for an agency, both from an agency perspective, but also from an agency client perspective, is then you have a great looking pitch, like this is what we're going to do for you. It's really like the A team, like this is, we're on top of our game. This is what we can do. Just to convince a client to pay you a lot of money, and then making sure you can deliver on that promise, it can be very challenging sometimes. You set the expectations very high, and you have to, because otherwise some other agency will take your client and they will choose someone else. So there's a big risk of you bringing yourself in trouble just because you really want to have this client. That's just me thinking out loud from my agency experience from back in the day. It's you really have to deliver every time.
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean, like in the agency world, it all like your next project generally comes from referrals. So it's about like keeping your reputation up. So making sure you deliver everything that's in that SOW for your client and knocking it out of the park so they're happy to recommend your next client.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So that's also like the ROI. I have a tendency to always think about, well, you put in time and money, and then you get results back. But it's also a return on investment for a designer can be, I am going to invest like 10% more energy and effort into this client because I think this client will open doors for me in the future.
Yeah. Sometimes you're doing some pre-work just because that helps, right? So it's like client doesn't have a lot of budgets, but there's they have a great network. So it's about like giving your value and saying, and then giving the ask, hey, do you know anyone in your network you can refer me to? That's
true.
It's a little tricky to do.
Is that part of your in-house worlds too? Like maybe like, hey, this stakeholder, maybe not in terms of this client has a network, but more like this stakeholder has a network within the company?
like interpersonal, so like within the company.
Yeah.
I don't generally see it as like ROI, but I think from my perspective, I work remotely.
Mm.
I believe you do as well. It's all it's
Mostly, yeah.
mostly. And I think oftentimes like we're all like in our little isolated little bubble. We have our five our 5 to 6 different team members that we interact with on a daily basis. Um, and then sometimes we miss that those conversations by like the kitchen or like grabbing water and then understanding context. So I always find like if you're at a company for a while or you just started, just to get to know everyone, I make it a task for me to just like every week or every other day, just meet someone new for like a quick coffee chat, just saying, "Hey, I'm here to help wherever I can." Um, and like generally people reach back to you because like they see a face. So like, oh, this person exists. I had no idea. I had no, I, I was
Yeah.
on the sales time. I had no idea about Tyler and the design team. I'll ask them this question that I had.
Yeah. I mean, that's going a little bit off topic now, but that's something for another episode, perhaps, like how to remain sane while working remotely the whole time. One end, and then the second half is more like, okay, if you're in the same space, the same office space, you can just walk over. People will literally see you. How can you make yourself seen while working remotely? Maybe that's a good thing for us to note somewhere for future episode ideas.
I think that's a perfect ending and a teaser for our next episode. I think that's a best.
That's us here live at this moment, experiencing what it's like to run a podcast. You have to put in teasers and intros and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Learning. We're 37 minutes in, and we're already learning how to do a teaser. So that's a big development.
Yeah, yeah. I think we'll be fumbling our way through this experience, but I think
Yeah.
as we keep doing it, we're going to get better and better at doing it. I think.
Of course, of course. It's podcasting in public. It's not building in public, what people always say, but it's podcasting in public.
I'm
Like
always a
people
fan
can
of in
just,
public, so people
yeah,
can see and you get that feedback.
yeah,
Circling back to that, we always need
exactly.
feedback, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we are designers. We are always looking for user feedback, and it would be a bit silly not to be open to receive feedback for ourselves, right? It's a two-way street, I would say.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, great. So, any closing remarks? Any thing? I mean, we don't even have a website yet. We don't even have a name for this show. But maybe it's good to share where people can find us, because we're probably going to talk about this show, this episode, whatever it's going to be on our social media and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can find me generally on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm trying to be more active on Twitter or X, as it's called now. Um, I've been slacking over the new year, but you can find me at Mr. Tyler White on most things.
Mr. Tyler White.
Yeah, I branded myself, just the Mister, and then my name.
Okay. All right. That's
How about
very
yourself?
cool. I'm also on Twitter /X. I always it feels a bit strange to call it posting on X. I'm still tweeting, but that's anyway. Uh, I'm on my handle over there is Toolbox of Design. It's called after like the very first website I ever made. Called the Designer's Toolbox, where it's literally about what the tools you need as a designer to do your job. And the Twitter handle still has that name, but the Designer's Toolbox was too long. Like Twitter didn't allow to have a name that way, so I was like, let's turn it around. So that's where people can find me. I'm always scared to change it to my full name because then I'm afraid like people can't find me anymore. It's like when you change your profile picture, then people don't recognize you anymore.
Well, I mean, that's how I found you. I found you through the toolbox, so that's how we met.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, this was fun, right? Doing a first ever hosted, for me at least, the first ever podcast episode.
Same here. So it was interesting. It was,
Yeah.
just relaxed, nothing too intense. Just like talking about things we do every day, but like we don't often get to talk about, I guess.
That's true. It's I like the different side of things we have. You know, you being in-house, me being more on the freelancing, consultancy, agency, that kind of side, and how things can be different, but also have some overlap there. Curious to see what that's like when talking about remote work and return to office and that kind of stuff, because I'm sure there's a difference of opinion there as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's been talks. It's just been like the big debate over the last, I think, 2 years probably, but I think it's been more active as of late.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it should remain a teaser. I have this inclination of now continuing this talk already.
All right.
There needs to
Cool.
be something left for the next time, next week, next month, next whenever we're the frequency we're going to go for. So let's wrap up for now.
Perfect. All right. So until next time.
Until next time.
Same bat channel, same bat time.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.